My name is Julie. I currently work with my husband Scott at his family's small business. This business is managed by my father-in-law Paul. It's a cozy place with about 5 employees. Paul doesn't get involved much in the daily work. Instead, Scott, who will soon take over as president, works hard. He looks for new clients and projects, showing his dedication to growing the business. When we have a big project, all the employees come together enthusiastically, creating a vibrant atmosphere. I have been working here for 12 years since I got married. Hey Julie, how long do you plan on clinging to our family business? My mother-in-law Olivia asked this as I came home early to make dinner while Scott was still at the office. Olivia had retired from the business when Scott and I got married and seemed happy about her retirement, but now, with more free time, she often criticized me. "What do you mean by clinging?" I asked, trying to stay calm. Olivia sharply replied, "Exactly what it sounds like. You must have married Scott because you couldn't find a job anywhere else, and now you're just taking advantage of our company." I sighed to myself. These kinds of comments from her were becoming more common. When I married, I left my previous job and joined Scott's family business by choice, not because I was fired. For some reason, Olivia thought I was completely unskilled at my job. I said before that it's not that I couldn't work somewhere else. I chose to join Scott's company, I told her. But she answered dismissively, "I can see right through your real intentions." She thought she knew everything about me and walked back to the living room. However, the problems with my mother-in-law weren't just her words. She had quit her job, promising to look after the house, but she never helped out. My father-in-law often asked her to do some chores since she was home all day, but she stubbornly refused, saying, "I've worked all my life. Now it's the daughter-in-law's turn to do the housework." As a result, I usually ended up making dinner. Olivia seemed to make and eat her own lunch as she liked, but she never cleaned up afterward. Each day, as I returned from my errands, the sight of piled-up plates and utensils greeted me, stirring a mix of frustration and resignation. Gathering my courage, I decided to address this domestic issue one sunny afternoon. "Olivia," I began hesitantly, trying to sound as diplomatic as possible, "I've noticed the dishes often get left in the sink. It would be really helpful if you could tidy up after your meals. It's just a small request, but it would mean a lot to me." To my dismay, Olivia's response was far from understanding. Her eyes flashed with anger as she snapped, "Are you trying to give me orders in my own house? You're just a daughter-in-law. How dare you dictate what I should do?" Her sharp and unyielding words reminded me of the delicate balance in our family dynamics. "I wish Helen were here instead of you," Olivia continued, her voice laced with a mix of longing and bitterness. Helen, Scott's younger sister and my sister-in-law, was a spirited and ambitious woman. Our encounters had been limited to brief formal meetings, and she was notably absent from our wedding, having canceled at the last minute. I later learned from Scott that she had overindulged with friends the night before and was nursing a hangover, unable to attend. Despite this, Helen pursued her dreams fiercely, relocating to Jersey after her college graduation to dive into the bustling world of fashion design. Trying to change the subject, I mentioned Helen's hard work and dedication. "Helen's really making a name for herself in Jersey, working hard in her field," I said, hoping to ease the tension. However, Olivia's views on Jersey were negative. Jersey, that cold, impersonal city. It's no place for someone as warm-hearted as Helen. "And you're from Jersey too, aren't you? Now it all makes sense. You're always so distant towards me." Caught in this tiring conversation, I realized that if I didn't start preparing dinner soon, we'd be eating much later than usual. While dealing with my own frustrations, I managed to stay calm. "Mom, let's continue this conversation later. I need to focus on getting dinner ready or we'll be eating quite late tonight." With some reluctance, Olivia finally went back to the living room, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the noise of the cooking utensils. Paul and Scott were both aware of Olivia's mistreatment towards me as a daughter-in-law and tried to intervene whenever they saw it happening. However, their efforts seemed to have little effect. Each time they confronted the situation, their faces showed concern and frustration, showing their desire to create harmony in our family. Ironically, whenever Paul and Scott scolded Olivia for her behavior, she took out her anger on me, becoming even more hostile and sharp with her words. Her face, usually kind and gentle, became twisted with disdain, her tone cutting deeper than before. Although I had never been physically hurt, the emotional impact of Olivia's words was significant. Paul and Scott's support had been my comfort, helping me somewhat ignore Olivia's harsh words. Until then, one morning, just after I had finished cleaning up from breakfast and was preparing to leave for work, something unimaginable happened. In the midst of the morning rush as I was hurrying, Olivia suddenly exclaimed, "Oh my, what a mess!" And without warning, she poured a bucket of water over my handbag. I was stunned, a mix of shock and anger making me speechless. "What are you doing, Olivia?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling with disbelief. Olivia's response was dismissive, her tone like that of a mischievous child. "Oh, was that your stuff? I thought it was just a big piece of trash," she said dismissively, which made me even angrier. "Even if you thought it was trash, who pours water on it? What kind of thinking is that? Now the carpet is all wet. Why would you do something like this?" I was really upset as I quickly took the wet things out of my bag, including important work documents, and laid them on the table. Olivia looked calm and didn't seem sorry or worried about how upset I was. "Because you don't need to go to work anymore," she said coolly. I was shocked. In our living room, filled with morning light, I sat across from Olivia. Her face was colder and more determined than usual. It was as if she had made a decision that would change everything. "Excuse me," I said, confused and surprised. "You've been in this house for 12 years, but now I can finally get rid of you," she declared. Her words hurt me deeply, and her voice had a level of anger and determination I had never heard before. My mind spun and my heart ached. "Getting rid of me?" I asked, unable to believe what I was hearing. Her words made me feel like an outsider in this family. "Actually, my daughter is joining the company, so we need you to leave. Today's your last day. All you have to do is bow your head to your father-in-law and Scott, apologizing for all the trouble you've caused," she said with a mocking laugh. She was using my job to push me out. I had spent years at that job earning respect and making memories. I was shocked and hurt. My devotion to this family seemed to mean nothing to her. It horrified me not just that she acted this way, but that after 12 years of hard work, she could ask me to leave so her daughter could take my place. It felt like my years of effort were being disregarded. "Really? Are you sure about this? Wasn't Helen working in a clothing store in Jersey?" I asked, reflecting my confusion and worry. My job was more than just a paycheck. It was my way of fulfilling myself. Meanwhile, Helen, my sister-in-law, seemed to have grown tired of city life and decided to come back to the family. She said she was tired of the unfriendly people in Jersey, so I told her if she came back home, I'd have a job ready for her. She agreed to return immediately. "Now that she's coming back, I want you out of this house," Olivia told me. I couldn't believe her words. She was ready to turn my life upside down with just one decision, completely ignoring my role in the family and not even listening to me. She handed me an envelope, saying, "I've written your resignation letter." And just like that, she kicked me out. My heart broke. Everything I had built over the years seemed worthless, treated like just a piece of paper. Her act deeply hurt our family bond. I walked the company just a quick 5-minute walk from my house. As I walked under the cool morning sky, each step was heavy with the weight of what was happening. When I told my father-in-law, Paul, and my husband's, Scott, about what my mother-in-law had said, they were shocked but stayed calm. They suggested that maybe it was time for me to resign to show her the reality of the situation. This idea upset me deeply. I had worked hard in our family business for years and barely knew what a long vacation was like, aside from short breaks during Thanksgiving and the holiday season. Encouraged by Scott and Paul's kind words, "Why don't you spread your wings for a change?" I decided to go on a little trip. As I packed, I thought a lot about my life, my choices, and what was ahead. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law, Helen, who was supposed to replace me at the company, shockingly didn't show up until 3:00 p.m. Her lack of responsibility disappointed Scott and Paul, who had been managing without me. Helen seemed not interested in learning the work, despite their efforts to teach her. Hearing this made me worry about the future of our company, even as I looked forward to my trip, leaving without seeing my mother-in-law. I quickly started my journey. During the trip, as I enjoyed the view from the train, I reflected on my life, past, present, and future, and savored local seafood delicacies. I thought deeply about myself, my family, and our business. But on the 5 days of my trip, the peace was broken when Helen called me, crying. "What's going on?" I asked. "Mom said it was an easy job, just sitting in a chair, but Scott and Dad are acting like I can't do anything right," she said. Her words, likely influenced by my mother-in-law, surprised me. Even as I was enjoying my break, I decided it was time to address the situation. "So, Helen, how good are you with computers?" I asked her hesitantly. She replied, "Well, I usually watch videos online and I play games too." This question was to see if Helen could adjust to a new job. Having worked in a clothing store in Jersey for a while, her computer skills seemed basic. "Do you know how to use Word or Excel?" I asked. Helen looked confused, showing she wasn't familiar with these tools in a professional setting. Even in clothing stores, tasks like managing sales data in Excel or recording customer info in Word are common. "Have you ever worked with image editing, video editing, or audio editing software? Do you have any experience with such tools?" I asked. Helen, clearly puzzled, replied, "What's all that?" This question aimed to dig deeper into her technical skills to better understand her capabilities. Considering her background in the apparel industry, it's unlikely she never used a computer. Tasks like tracking sales, managing inventory, and inputting customer data would have required her to use Excel. When asked if she can handle calculations for sales or fill in documents, she confidently said, "I can do that." However, when I asked if she could also calculate tax, her confidence faded, and she answered uncertainly. This question tested her math skills and her ability to use them in a business context. While Helen might have other skills, it was clear she was insecure about the necessary skills for the job. Her discomfort seemed mainly due to her struggle with calculations, which could explain why she faced criticism from Paul and Scott. First and foremost, I needed to show my mother-in-law and those who tried to push me out that they were mistaken. "Since you're taking over my job," I told Helen that she needed to handle the accounting tasks well and remember to be professional in her emails, because a casual tone that might be fine with friends doesn't work for business. She would also be in charge of scheduling the staff shifts. Even though our team is small, we carefully consider everyone's time off requests, so she shouldn't just think about what's convenient for her. As I listed these expectations, I could hear her sobbing on the other end of the phone. But I was told I wouldn't have to do anything. "Why are there so many tasks? I didn't come back home for this," she said, and then abruptly ended the call. Over the next 4 days, I decided to enjoy sightseeing in Jersey, the place Helen had left. My time there showed me that not everyone in Jersey is unfriendly. Actually, finding someone as cold-hearted as my mother-in-law and Helen seemed rare. A week after I left my job, I returned to my in-laws' house. When I arrived, Olivia, looking very upset, confronted me angrily. "How dare you make my daughter cry? You won't get away with this," she yelled, her eyes full of anger and misunderstanding. She tried to grab me, but Scott and Paul quickly stepped in to calm her down. Though her anger didn't seem to lessen, Scott sighed deeply before saying, "Helen is upset because she was scolded for trying to boss her employees around despite not being able to do the job right. It's not Julie's fault. Besides, Julie hasn't been here for a week, so she couldn't have upset Helen." "Mom, you really need to stop these groundless accusations," but Olivia kept blaming me. "It's because of her. This woman is the reason for Helen's trouble," she claimed, her voice emotional and filled with baseless suspicions. "Where is Helen, by the way?" I asked, looking around the living room, but Helen was nowhere to be seen. Her absence added more confusion to an already puzzling situation. While it didn't matter to me that Olivia was upset about Helen, I knew Helen didn't have many options since she had ended her lease at her apartment in Jersey. I thought Helen would be at her parents' house, but she wasn't there, which made me wonder. Helen's locked herself in her room. She's been crying and saying she doesn't want to go to work anymore, Scott explained. It seemed like Helen had avoided learning the job properly. It was understandable, though, because she didn't have the skills needed to replace me. "You've been turning Scott and Paul against me, haven't you? Otherwise, they wouldn't say the company ran better with you than with Helen, who can't do the job," Olivia accused me sharply. Her words were filled with long-standing misunderstandings and prejudices, leaving me completely baffled. She seemed to have always seen me as an opponent, her words reflecting years of wrong ideas. Scott let out a heavy sigh, his face showing his tiredness and frustration with the complicated emotions in our family. He had tried many times to clear up the misunderstandings among family members, but it didn't seem to work very well. "Mom, I know it might sound odd coming from me, but Julie is truly exceptional at her work. She's certified in bookkeeping, and her secretarial skills are top-notch. Moreover, she studied Spanish and even has experience studying abroad. When it comes to dealing with multiple languages at our company, Julie handles everything," Scott said with a sense of pride. His mother, Olivia, looked very surprised. She had assumed that I quit my job as soon as I joined the family, so she had no idea about my contributions and achievements at work. "What? That sounds like something straight out of a TV drama," I thought, recalling my college days. I was so focused on getting various certifications that I immersed myself in my studies, so much that I barely had time for clubs or a romantic relationship. It was during this busy time that I met Scott, who came to my company for business. As I found myself sharing the story of how Scott and I first met, I realized that this wasn't what Olivia wanted to hear, so I quickly got back to the main point. In short, I was responsible for a lot of tasks at the company, from handling accounting to scheduling, working with other companies, and managing employee shifts. Thanks to that, I could reach out to other businesses for deals, making the work environment much more comfortable than when Olivia was around, Scott added, leaving Olivia speechless. Just then, Paul, Scott's father, made a comment that surprised me. "We're going to shut down the company soon, actually. Helen made a big mistake. Even though she was supposed to prepare some documents, she decided to handle phone calls because it seemed more fun. While Scott and I were away, she ended up being rude to the person in charge from another company. Of course, I got a call to confirm this. Hearing this, I was so shocked that I instinctively covered my mouth with my hand. I can't believe Helen would do something like that, I murmured, filled with disbelief. The thought that Helen's actions might lead to the downfall of our company went through my mind, filling me with dread. However, as I was lost in these anxious thoughts, the story took an unexpected turn. When I explained the situation, they suggested it might be time to end the family business. "We had mentioned this to you before, right? about being absorbed by another company, they said. Then the president of the company stepped forward, saying he was interested if Julie and I were involved. This was an unexpected but long-hoped-for development. Running a family business has its limits, and it's uncertain whether we could consistently attract stable customers. That's why Scott had always worked hard in sales, trying to secure new clients. Being absorbed by a larger company could mean having a steady base of customers. The future, once uncertain, suddenly seemed to have a bit of hope. However, this news only brought relief to me, Scott, and his father. Scott's mother suddenly opposed the idea, saying, "That's not acceptable. Scott must become the president. This company is ours, isn't it?" I was surprised by this sudden change. It seemed that more than a stable future, Olivia was concerned about maintaining the prestige of being part of a company president's family. "And you're telling me he's not going to be the president anymore?" "Absolutely not acceptable," Olivia exclaimed passionately. This commotion caught the interest of Helen, who was upstairs in her room, leading her to come down to the living room to see what was happening. In response to the chaos started by Olivia, Paul spoke up calmly but firmly. "I am divorcing you. So either way, you will no longer be part of this executive family. Not only have you not changed your attitude towards my son's wife, but you also neglect household chores. To top it off, you spend your days out with young men instead of being home. I have no intention of supporting such a wife any longer." This was news to both me and Scott. We were so shocked that we could only stare at Paul with wide eyes. It seemed he had planned to discuss divorce from the beginning, as he took out divorce papers and a photo of Olivia with a young man from the living room shelf, placing them on the table. "If you sign the divorce papers now and leave with your belongings, I won't ask for alimony. I know getting any money from you would be pointless anyway," Paul said. "So unfair. How can you say that? Haven't I been devoted to this house all these years?" Olivia protested. "Devoted to this house? Have you done any real housework in the last 12 years? Does spending someone else's money on young men count as devotion to the house?" Paul countered. It was the first time we saw him this angry. Seeing this, Helen, who had come down to the living room, was visibly shaking from shock. "Helen, you're part of this too. You came back home because you couldn't make it in Jersey, and now you can't find a job but still act superior. In the end, you stopped working entirely. Who did you inherit this escapism from? It's time for you to leave this house too," he continued. Next, we saw Helen's shock and resistance. She believed she was an important member of the family. The reality was different. "Wait a minute, Dad. I might be a lost cause, but I'm your precious daughter, right?" she said. The family conflict deepened as Helen tried to assert her place, revealing her betrayal towards her mother. "Helen, are you betraying me now?" Olivia exclaimed, feeling betrayed by her daughter at the last moment. However, as the two started to argue loudly, Paul sternly silenced them with a shout. "If I just kick you out, it'll cause trouble for everyone. So I've asked an acquaintance to take you in. They'll be here soon to pick you up. Get your minimum belongings ready." Left with no choice, Olivia and Helen began packing their belongings. Then an acquaintance of Paul arrived to take Olivia and Helen away. The person who came to pick them up was running a factory with dormitories, and it seemed they would be working there. Meanwhile, Scott, Paul, and I talked to the employees about the company being absorbed and prepared for the busy days ahead for our future. Finally, I found out I was pregnant. When I told the president of the company, he was delighted and promised to send someone to replace me, which was a huge relief. Currently, Scott and Paul are working even harder for the sake of our upcoming child.
I stood in the living room, watching James walk out with his fancy suitcase. His young girlfriend, Sophia, followed closely behind him. The strong scent of her perfume filled the air, mixing with the dinner I had cooked just hours before, the same dinner where my world fell apart. "You're pathetic, Anna," James said coldly, turning back one last time. No one will believe your crazy accusations. I made sure of that. He tapped his jacket pocket where his phone held fake messages and proof to make me look unstable. I didn't say a word. After 15 years of marriage, he expected me to cry or beg. But I just sipped my tea, looking at him calmly. Nothing to say, he mocked. No more wild ideas about what I've been doing with our money. Sophie giggled and grabbed his arm. James, baby, let's go. She's not worth it. I set my teacup down. You're right, James. I have nothing more to say. His face turned red. He hated when I didn't react. He wanted me to be emotional so he could call me crazy. Good, he snapped. My lawyer will contact you. Don't expect much. I've covered my tracks. They got into his expensive car and drove away. I waited until the taillights disappeared, then walked straight to his home office. The room smelled like his cologne. His diplomas hung on the wall, showing off his success as a neurosurgeon. I ignored them and went to his desk. The bottom drawer had a hidden compartment. James thought I didn't know about it, but I did. That's where he kept his secret journal. He wrote down everything. Every lie, every stolen dollar, every way he manipulated me. He was so confident that he thought no one would ever catch him. I pulled out the leather-bound book and flipped through the pages. One entry stood out. Anna's getting suspicious. Told her she's been forgetful. Maybe she needs a doctor. She believed me. So easy to make her doubt herself. I had already seen these pages before. I had copied every single one and sent them to my lawyer. While James was busy making me look crazy, I was quietly collecting proof. Another entry caught my eye. Sophia is perfect for my plan. She thinks I'll build a life with her after I leave Anna. Poor girl has no clue she's just a pawn. Once I get the hospital board position, I'll need someone better for my image. I closed the journal. James had spent years gaslighting me, convincing me I was wrong about his lies, making me doubt what I saw. But he had made one big mistake. He underestimated me. My phone buzzed. A message from my lawyer, Margaret. Everything is ready. He accessed the accounts just like we predicted. Are you ready to proceed? I looked around the office one last time. Soon, James would try to take money from our joint accounts, only to find them frozen. By morning, the hospital board would see proof of how he stole funds, and Sophia, she would realize James had been lying to her too. Yes, I texted back. It's time. I opened the safe behind his expensive painting. Last month, James had changed the lock code, thinking I wouldn't notice. But I had secretly recorded him entering the numbers. Inside the safe were more documents, proof of stolen money, fake hospital records, and secret offshore accounts. For years, James had tried to break me, but every lie only made me stronger. Now, I finally had the truth, and I was going to use it. Another text came in, this time from Detective Torres. Got your evidence. Very thorough. Ready when you are. I smiled. James thought no one would believe me. He was about to find out how wrong he was. I heard cars pull into the driveway. Through the window, I saw Margaret step out of her car, followed by Detective Torres. It was time to show the world who James really was. I gathered the journal and the files, ready to hand them over. James thought he was walking away free, but he had actually left me with everything I needed to take him down. The doorbell rang. It was time to finish this. The next morning, I sat in Margaret's office, watching James's carefully constructed world crumble through a series of increasingly frantic text messages on my phone. What did you do? The accounts are frozen. Anna, fix this now. You have no idea what you're doing. Each message grew more desperate than the last. I set my phone aside as Margaret spread the journal's contents across her desk, her experienced eyes scanning each damning page. This is extraordinary, she said, adjusting her glasses. Not only did he document the hospital fraud, but he also detailed every step of his plan to discredit you. Most people trying to commit fraud don't create such a thorough record of their crimes. I smiled faintly. James always thought he was the smartest person in the room. He wrote everything down because he never believed anyone would find it, let alone understand the implications. Well, his arrogance is our advantage, Margaret replied, holding up a particularly detailed entry. Look at this. He even recorded the exact amounts he transferred to his offshore accounts. Makes our job much easier. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Sophia. James is freaking out. What's going on? He says you're trying to ruin him. I ignored her message. She'd learn the truth soon enough. Detective Torres entered the office, carrying a thick file. Mrs. Parker, we've verified the offshore account numbers from the journal. Every transaction matches the evidence we've gathered. Your husband wasn't just embezzling from your joint accounts, he was stealing from the hospital's research fund. I thought about all the times James had come home late, claiming he was working on crucial research. How many of those nights had he actually spent falsifying records and moving money? What happens next? I asked, my voice steady. The hospital board is reviewing the evidence now, Detective Torres replied. Given the amount of money involved and the detailed nature of your husband's records, they're taking this very seriously. As if on cue, my phone lit up with a news alert, prominent neurosurgeon under investigation for financial fraud. The story was already breaking. Margaret handed me a cup of coffee. Are you ready for phase 2? Once we file these documents with the court, there's no going back. I took a sip, remembering the night 6 months ago when I first discovered the journal. I'd been looking for a missing earring in his office when I found it, hidden away in that false drawer. Reading those pages had been like having every suspicion, every doubt I pushed aside confirmed in black and white. I'm ready, I said firmly. File everything. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Margaret's team worked efficiently, submitting document after document to the courts. Each piece of evidence was another nail in the coffin of James' reputation. Around noon, my phone rang. James's mother, Eleanor. Anna dear, her usually imperious voice trembled slightly. Please tell me these horrible stories aren't true. The hospital called James in for an emergency board meeting, and now I'm seeing all these dreadful news reports. Have you asked James about it? I kept my tone neutral. Eleanor had always favored her son, dismissing any suggestion that he might be less than perfect. He's not answering his phone, she admitted. And that girl he's been seeing, Sophia, she's making quite a scene at the hospital, demanding to know what's happening. I almost felt sorry for Sophia, almost. Everything will become clear soon, Eleanor, I said quietly. Just prepare yourself. As I ended the call, Detective Torres returned with an update. Your husband's trying to access the offshore accounts. He's getting desperate. And Sophia? Left the hospital in tears after security escorted her out. Apparently, she was threatening to expose some of his secrets unless he paid her what he promised. I nodded, unsurprised. Sophia had always struck me as more calculating than the besotted girlfriend she pretended to be. The afternoon brought more developments. The hospital board had suspended James pending investigation. His carefully cultivated reputation was unraveling faster than he could spin new lies. Finally, around 4 o'clock, he appeared at Margaret's office, barging in unannounced. He'd lost his usual polished appearance, his shirt was wrinkled, his hair disheveled. You vindictive witch, he snarled when he saw me. What have you done? I met his gaze calmly. I haven't done anything, James. You did this to yourself. Those journals were private, he shouted. You had no right. To what? I interrupted. To expose your fraud? To prove I wasn't crazy or paranoid? To show everyone exactly who you really are. Margaret stepped forward. Mr. Parker, I suggest you leave now and direct all future communication through your lawyer. James's face contorted with rage. This isn't over, Anna. No one will believe. They already do, I cut in, sliding a copy of the day's news coverage across the table. Your own words, James. Every lie, every manipulation, every crime, all in your own handwriting. He stared at the papers, the color draining from his face as he finally realized the extent of his exposure. His hands shook as he picked up one of the articles. You'll regret this, he threatened, but his voice had lost its power. I stood up, gathering my belongings. No, James. The only thing I regret is not doing this sooner. As security escorted him out, I watched through the window as his world continued to collapse. His phone rang incessantly, probably the hospital board. His lawyers, maybe even Sophia, all demanding explanations he couldn't give. Detective Torres appeared at my side. The hospital's pressing charges. With the evidence from the journal and the financial records, he's looking at serious time. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief. The man I'd married, the life I thought we had, it had all been a carefully constructed lie. But now finally, the truth was coming out. You did the right thing, Margaret assured me, gathering the documents into a secure file. Phase 2 was complete. Are you ready for what comes next? I took a deep breath. Yes. It's time everyone knew the whole story. The media storm hit harder than I'd expected. By the next morning, James's fall from grace was the leading story in every local paper. Respected surgeon's double life exposed screamed one headline. Hospital fraud scheme uncovered through personal journal declared another. I sat in my kitchen, watching the morning news coverage while Detective Torres updated me on the latest developments. "We've frozen all the accounts we could trace," he said, reviewing his notes. "But there's still money missing. Around $2 million that we can't locate." I sipped my coffee, remembering a particular journal entry from 3 years ago. Check his mother's beach house in Florida. The entry from March 2021 mentioned a safe behind the master bedroom's wood paneling. Detective Torres raised an eyebrow, impressed. "You really did read everything carefully, didn't you? When you spend years being told you're paranoid, you learn to pay attention to details." My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "We need to talk. There are things you should know." Before I could respond, another message appeared, this time from James. "Meet me. 1 hour. The cafe where we first met, or I release the videos." I showed the messages to Detective Torres, who immediately started typing on his phone. "We'll have plainclothes officers in place. But are you sure you want to do this?" I nodded. "He's bluffing about the videos. There's an entry in the journal about them. They're fake, staged with Sophia to make me look unstable. He was saving them as insurance." "We'll still need to proceed carefully," he warned. An hour later, I walked into the Morning Roast Cafe. James sat at our old table, looking disheveled but still maintaining an air of arrogance. Sophia sat nervously beside him, avoiding my eyes. "Anna," he attempted his old, charming smile. "Let's be reasonable about this." I sat down across from them, acutely aware of the plainclothes officers scattered throughout the cafe. "I'm listening." "This can all go away," he leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I have videos that show you having mental breakdowns, being violent. If these get out, no one will believe anything you say. Your credibility will be destroyed." Sophia shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "You mean the videos you staged?" I asked calmly. "The ones you detailed in your journal? Including the dates they were filmed, who helped you create them, and how much you paid everyone to participate?" James's smile faltered. Sophia's head snapped up. "You wrote about those?" she asked him, her voice sharp. "He wrote about everything," I replied, pulling out copies of specific journal entries, including his plans to discard you once you'd served your purpose. Sophia grabbed the papers, her hands trembling as she read. Her face paled. "You said I was special," she whispered to James. "You said once the divorce was final." "He also wrote about the other women," I added quietly. "You weren't the first, and you wouldn't have been the last." James slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. Those journals were private. You had no right." Actually, Detective Torres appeared beside our table. "Those journals are now evidence in a criminal investigation, along with the videos you just attempted to use for blackmail." I watched as the last traces of color drained from James's face. Sophia stood up abruptly, grabbing her designer bag. "I don't want any part of this," she announced. "And James, check your phone. I just sent some interesting screenshots to the detective here. Turns out I can keep records too." She stormed out, leaving James staring after her in shock. "It's over," I said softly. "The board has the evidence of your embezzlement. The police have proof of your fraud. Everyone knows the truth now." "You've ruined everything," he hissed. "No, James, you did that yourself. Every time you wrote in that journal, every time you convinced yourself you were too clever to get caught, you were building the case against yourself." Detective Torres placed a hand on James's shoulder. "Mr. Parker, we need you to come with us. We have some questions about the money hidden in your mother's beach house." As they led James away, I remained at the table, looking around the cafe where our story had begun 15 years ago. Back then, I thought I found someone who valued and respected me. Instead, I'd married a man who spent years trying to make me doubt my own sanity. My phone buzzed with a message from Margaret. "Hospital board meeting tomorrow. They want you to testify." I typed a quick reply. "I'll be there." Tomorrow I would tell my story, not as the unstable woman James had tried to paint me as, but as someone who had found the strength to expose the truth. And I had his own words to back me up, every step of the way. The journal that was meant to document his triumph had become the instrument of his downfall, and there was a certain poetry in that. The hospital board meeting was held in a stark conference room, its walls lined with awards and accolades, many of them bearing James's name. As I prepared to testify, I watched them take down his framed achievements one by one. "Mrs. Parker," the board chairman began, "we've reviewed the evidence you provided, but we'd like to hear from you directly about what you discovered." I opened the journal to the first flagged page. It started 3 years ago. James began documenting discrepancies in the research fund accounts. At first, small amounts, 10,000 here, 20,000 there. But it grew. The board members listened intently as I walked them through James's detailed records of his fraud. Every transaction, every falsified research report, every manipulated budget, all meticulously documented in his own handwriting. The total amount, I concluded, comes to just over $4 million. Most of it has been recovered from various accounts, including the safe in his mother's beach house. The chairman removed his glasses, rubbing his temples. And the personal elements, the attempts to discredit you? I shared the entries where James had plotted to make me appear unstable, his strategies for gaslighting me, his plans for using Sophia to create evidence of my supposed mental instability. When I finished, the room was silent. Finally, the chairman spoke. "Mrs. Parker, we owe you an apology. Many of us witnessed James' attempts to question your stability, and we did nothing." "You weren't the only ones," I replied quietly. He was very convincing. After the meeting, I found Sophia waiting outside. She looked different, younger somehow, without her usual perfect makeup and designer clothes. "I'm sorry," she said simply. "I didn't know about any of it. I thought," she trailed off. "You thought you were special." I finished for her. "That's what he wanted you to believe." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I've told the police everything. About the staged videos, the promises he made, how he coached me to act around you." "Thank you," I said. "That will help their case." As I walked to my car, Margaret called with an update. James took a plea deal. 8 years, plus full restitution. His medical license is being revoked. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. And the divorce? "Given the evidence of fraud and his criminal conviction, you'll get everything you're entitled to. He won't be able to touch your assets or contest the settlement." That evening, I returned to our house, my house now, and began packing up James's remaining belongings. In his office, I found more journals, older ones dating back to the beginning of our marriage. Reading them was like watching someone slowly transform into a monster page by page. The early entries showed ambition tinged with arrogance. Over time, that arrogance grew into something darker, more calculating. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor, James's mother. "I found more documents in the beach house safe. I'm giving everything to Detective Torres. I'm so sorry, Anna. I should have seen who he really was." I set the phone down and continued packing, coming across photos from happier times, our wedding, vacations, hospital galas. In each one, I could now see what I'd missed. The calculated look in James's eyes, the way he positioned himself to be the center of attention, how I seemed to fade into the background. But I wasn't that person anymore. 6 months later, I stood in the newly renovated living room of my house. Gone were the pretentious artworks James had insisted on, replaced by pieces that brought me joy. His dark leather furniture had been exchanged for comfortable, bright pieces that made the space feel like home. Detective Torres had become a friend, stopping by occasionally to update me on the case's final details. "The last of the money has been recovered," he told me during one visit. "The hospital's research fund has been fully restored." "And James?" I asked. "Adapting poorly to prison life, from what I hear, keeps insisting everyone's conspiring against him." I thought about the journal that had started it all, now safely stored as evidence. He never understood that his biggest enemy was himself. Margaret called with one final piece of news. "The divorce is official. You're free." Free, the word echoed in my mind as I looked around my home. Free from the gaslighting, the manipulation, the constant self-doubt. Free to be myself again. I'd started volunteering at a support group for victims of psychological abuse, sharing my story to help others recognize the signs I'd missed for so long. Some of the women there had similar stories of manipulation, of carefully documented lies, of the strength it took to break free. My phone buzzed with a message from Sophia. Testified against James today. Thought you should know, he still doesn't get it. Still thinks he's the victim. Thank you for showing me the truth. I smiled, remembering James's sneering words that night. No one will ever believe your stories. But they had believed, because in the end it wasn't just my word against his. It was his own words, his own detailed records of his crimes that had revealed the truth. I walked to my bedroom window, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. The journal that James had kept as a trophy of his cleverness had become the key to my freedom. Sometimes I realized the truth has a way of coming out, one page at a time. Time to write my own story, I whispered to myself and opened my laptop to begin. Marcus smirked as he threw his duffel bag into the trunk of his BMW. No marriage certificate, no property split, he said. You can't claim anything without proof. I stood there, keeping my face calm even though I was boiling inside. My name is Olivia Parker, and at 35, I was watching my husband of 8 years leave me for his 25-year-old girlfriend. A husband who had conveniently lost our marriage certificate 2 months ago during our home renovation. Don't worry about the house, Marcus added, checking his hair in a car mirror. You can stay here until I decide what to do with it. Consider it a gift. He even winked, like he was being generous. I crossed my arms, silently watching him. He expected me to cry, beg, or get angry. Instead, I said nothing. No reaction, he asked, sounding disappointed. Not going to fight for our marriage. I almost laughed. Fight for a man who was literally moving in with another woman. The same woman he had been secretly seeing for months. No, Marcus, I said calmly, your decision is clear. He frowned, clearly surprised. He thought he was in control, that he was too smart to be caught. He believed that without a marriage certificate, I had no legal claim to anything. But what he didn't know was that I had been paying attention. The late nights, the locked phone, the work dinners that never showed up on his expense reports, I had seen it all. After all, I had worked in criminal investigations for years. This would be easier if you just accepted that things change, Marcus continued. Sophia understands me in ways you never could. I smiled slightly. Sophia, the young paralegal who somehow lived in a luxury apartment. The same woman who had been asking a lot of questions about our property at the office Christmas party. I'm sure she does, I replied. Something in my tone made Marcus pause. What do you mean by that? I shrugged. Just wishing you well. That's what divorcing couples do, right? He narrowed his eyes. We're not divorcing. No marriage certificate, no divorce. And even if you found a copy, everything's in my name. You have nothing. I thought about the call I made last week, about the documents stored in my office. Marcus thought he had covered his tracks. But he had underestimated me. You're right, I said softly. I guess I have nothing to lose. His confidence wavered for the first time. What are you planning? Planning? I echoed. Nothing at all. Just watching my husband leave for his girlfriend. He got into his car, trying to act like he wasn't nervous. Don't do anything stupid, Olivia. You can't win against me in court. I'm a lawyer. Oh, I remember, I said with a small smile. Say hi to Sophia for me. As he drove away, I pulled out my phone and called a number I knew by heart. Detective Parker's office answered a familiar voice. Hey, Jim, I said, watching Marcus disappear down the street. Remember that favor you owe me? I need to check some records. Jim chuckled. This about Marcus? Let's just say I need to verify some paperwork. About time, Jim said. Come by tomorrow, and Olivia, bring your laptop. You'll want to see this. I ended the call and looked up at the house Marcus thought he could take from me. He had always underestimated me. He forgot that before I was his wife, I was a forensic investigator, specializing in financial crimes. Tomorrow was going to be very interesting. The next morning, I walked into Jim's office carrying my laptop and 8 years' worth of carefully documented evidence. The familiar smell of coffee and old case files brought back memories of my days working in this department. Still keeping that door hinge squeaky for dramatic effect, I asked, settling into the chair across from his desk. Jim grinned, pushing a cup of coffee toward me. Some things never change. Speaking of change, I pulled those records you asked about. He turned his monitor toward me. Your husband's been busy. I leaned forward, scanning the document on his screen. It was a digital copy of our marriage certificate filed with the county clerk's office 8 years ago. Next to it was a series of access logs showing repeated attempts to alter the digital records over the past 3 months. He tried to hack the county database. I couldn't help but laugh. Marcus always thought he was smarter than everyone else. Not just tried, Jim said, clicking through more logs. He paid someone to do it, left a pretty clear trail too. Amateur hour stuff. He paused, studying my face. You knew this was coming, didn't you? I opened my laptop, pulling up folders of meticulously organized files. Let's just say I learned a thing or two about documentation during our marriage. Each folder contained years of financial records, property deeds, text messages, and emails. I'd started backing everything up the day Marcus began working late with his new paralegal. Look at this, I said, showing Jim a particular email thread. 3 months ago, Sophia started asking about property transfers and marriage nullification. Marcus thought he was being clever using her private email, but he forgot I used to track digital forensics for a living. Jim whistled low as he scrolled through the evidence. He's not just trying to hide your marriage. He's been moving assets around, setting up shell companies. His eyes narrowed at a particular document. Is that the deed to your Vermont cabin? The one he claims is only in his name. I smiled. Check the original filing date. Jim's eyebrows shot up as he read. You bought it before the marriage, with your own money. From my 5 years of savings as an investigator, I confirmed. Marcus just assumed it was his because he's used to taking credit for everything. We spent the next hour going through the documentation. Every attempt Marcus had made to hide our marriage or shield assets had left a digital footprint. His mistake wasn't just in underestimating me. It was in forgetting what I did before I met him. One more thing, Jim said, pulling out a thick folder. Remember that fraud case you helped crack back in 2015? The one with the falsified property records? I nodded, the pieces clicking into place. The Henderson case. The one where we proved digital tampering with county records. Exactly, and guess who just hired the same tech guy Henderson used? Jim pushed a surveillance photo across the desk. It showed Marcus meeting with a man I recognized from the old case files. Oh, Marcus, I sighed, shaking my head. You really should have Googled your hacker better. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Stopped by the house. Where are you? We need to talk about the property situation. I showed the message to Jim, who chuckled. Guess he's figured out he can't access the home security system anymore. Amazing what changing a few passwords can do, I replied, gathering my files. Think we have enough here? Jim nodded, his expression serious. More than enough. Want me to make some calls? I know a few judges who'd be very interested in this attempted records tampering. Not yet, I said, standing up. First, I want to give Marcus one chance to do the right thing. Not because he deserves it, but because I want him to know exactly what he's up against. Always the strategist, Jim smiled. Given hell, Olivia. As I drove home, I thought about Marcus's face when he realized his clever plan wasn't so clever after all. He'd spent months orchestrating what he thought was the perfect escape. Hiding our marriage certificate, moving assets, setting up his new life with Sophia. All while assuming I was too trusting, too naive to notice. My phone buzzed again. Olivia, where are you? This is important. Call me. I pulled into our driveway, noticing Marcus's BMW parked on the street. He was sitting on the front steps, his usually perfect hair slightly disheveled. His confidence replaced by obvious agitation. Where have you been? He demanded, standing up as I approached. I've been trying to reach you all morning. I walked past him to unlock the door, my evidence files tucked safely in my bag. Sorry, I was at a meeting. About our marriage certificate, actually. He followed me inside, his footsteps faltering slightly. What do you mean, a meeting? I turned to face him, enjoying the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. You know, Marcus, for a lawyer, you really should be more careful about who you hire to hack government databases. The color drained from his face. For the first time since this all began, Marcus looked genuinely afraid. What exactly are you implying? Marcus asked, trying to regain his composure as we stood in our living room. His lawyer mask was slipping back into place, but I could see the panic in his eyes. I'm not implying anything, I replied calmly, setting my bag on the coffee table. I'm telling you that I have proof of your attempts to tamper with county records, hide assets, and fraudulently invalidate our marriage. Would you like to see the evidence? He sank into the armchair, his confidence crumbling. How did you? No. I finished for him. Marcus, did you forget what I did before we met? Financial crimes investigation isn't just a job title. It's a skill set. I pulled out my laptop and began opening files. Let's start with the cabin in Vermont. The one you claimed was yours? I bought it before we married. Here's the deed, the bank transfers, and my old pay stubs proving the source of funds. That's not, he started, but I cut him off. Then there's the matter of our marriage certificate. Did you really think hiring the same hacker from the Henderson case was smart? The case I helped prosecute. I turned the screen toward him, showing the access logs. Every attempt to alter those records is documented. Every email between you and Sophia about property transfers, tracked. Marcus stood up abruptly, pacing the room. This is ridiculous. You're trying to intimidate me. Sophia's father is a judge. He'll never let. Judge Harrison. I smiled. The one who presided over the Henderson case? I'm sure he'd be very interested to know his daughter is involved in similar activities. That stopped him cold. You wouldn't. Try me. I closed my laptop. Here's what's going to happen, Marcus. You have two choices. First option, we handle this fairly. A clean divorce, equal property division, no games. I'll even let you keep the BMW you love so much. He swallowed hard. And the second option, I take everything I've found to the State Bar Association, the district attorney, and every judge in the circuit. Your law license, your reputation, your freedom, all gone. And Sophia? She'll be facing charges too. You're bluffing, he said, but his voice wavered. I pulled out my phone and dialed Jim's number, putting it on speaker. Hey Jim, we ready to move forward with those charges? Just say the word, Olivia. Jim's voice crackled through the speaker. The DA's been briefed, and Judge Harrison is particularly interested in the evidence involving his daughter. Marcus collapsed back into the chair, his face ashen. Turn it off. I ended the call, watching him process his complete loss of control. The man who thought he could outsmart everyone was finally realizing he'd been outplayed. Why? He asked quietly. Why not just turn me in? Because despite everything, I love you once, I replied honestly. And because I'd rather move forward than waste time on revenge. But make no mistake, if you try to fight this, I won't hesitate to use everything I have. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. Finally, he looked up, and I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes. Respect. The prenup, he said. It's still valid. Even split, right? I nodded. That's all I ever wanted, Marcus. A fair ending. The next few weeks passed in a blur of paperwork and negotiations. True to his word, once broken, Marcus handled the divorce fairly. The marriage certificate mysteriously reappeared in our files, and all attempts to alter county records ceased. Sophia, faced with the prospect of charges and her father's disappointment, quickly distanced herself from the situation. Last I heard, she transferred to a firm in another state. As I stood in the cabin that autumn, watching leaves fall over the lake, I felt nothing but peace. Sometimes winning isn't about destroying your opponent. It's about being prepared, staying calm, and knowing when to show your hand. Jim called to check on me occasionally. You could have taken him for everything, he said during one call. Why didn't you? Because this way, I want something more valuable than property, I replied, sipping my coffee on the cabin's porch. I won my freedom, my dignity, and the knowledge that I never had to compromise who I am. The lake stretched out before me, calm and clear, reflecting the mountains like a mirror. Marcus had always underestimated this place, seeing it as just another asset. He never understood that its real value lay in the peace it offered, the strength it represented. I smiled, thinking about how differently things had turned out from what Marcus planned. He thought he was dealing with a knave wife he could easily deceive. Instead, he learned a valuable lesson. Never underestimate a woman who knows her worth and keeps receipts. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply showing someone exactly who you've been all along.